Have you ever stopped to think about how much of your life is spent worrying that most of the time never comes to fruition? It seems like we live in an age where anxiety has become a way of life, and many of us don't even question it. But what if I told you that all this worrying is actually unnecessary? Yes, you read that right. It may seem counterintuitive, but the more we try to solve everything on our own, the more we lose control. What Jesus taught more than 2,000 years ago about not worrying is a principle that continues to be vital today. You may be asking yourself, but what about my bills? My problems? The truth is that there's a wiser and more balanced way to deal with these issues, and it doesn't involve carrying the world on your shoulders. What if I told you that the key is to trust in something greater? How about starting to experience this change now? Jesus, with his timeless wisdom, reminded everyone that life has a much greater depth than the worries that often suffocate us. He spoke about how useless it is to focus excessively on things like food or clothing, because this limits our vision of what really matters. When we look at the ravens, which neither sow nor reap, we realize that God cares for them with wisdom and precision. If he cares even for birds, imagine how much more he cares for those who have faith. And so the real question is, why do we torment ourselves with trivial things? Anxiety about basic needs traps us in a chain of worries that should not exist. The problem is not in planning or being responsible, but in living a life guided by the constant fear of tomorrow. Jesus teaches us that no matter how hard we try, this will not bring more peace or security. Trusting in God goes far beyond simply believing. It is living with the hope that he knows our needs before we even ask. This trust should free us from the bonds of anxiety and lead us to live more lightly. Think for a moment. How many times have you worried about something that eventually resolved itself? Jesus' wisdom invites us not to be consumed by these daily worries. If God cares for all of creation, from a simple bird to a flower in the field, he certainly will not fail to care for us, even when circumstances seem uncertain. Perhaps the secret to peace lies precisely in accepting that our security is in his hands and not in ours. Anxiety is a constant in our day and age, but Jesus warned us about it long ago. He made it clear that worrying cannot add even a single minute to our lives. Instead, it robs us of peace and distances us from the trust we should place in God. If we stop to reflect, we will see that many of the things that cause us anxiety are situations beyond our control. This is where faith comes in. This unshakable hope that God knows all our needs and works to meet each one of them in the right time. Jesus calls us to trust because he understands that anxiety is too heavy a burden to bear alone. When we surrender ourselves to God's care, we find rest. A practical example of this is dedicating time to prayer or meditation. When we are anxious, stopping for a few minutes to reflect on the blessings we have already received can change our perspective. This practice of trust needs to be practiced daily, even in times when circumstances seem to be falling apart around us. Having faith does not mean living a life without challenges. Rather, it is believing that no matter what comes, God is in control. He has not promised us a life without problems, but he has assured us that he will be present in every moment. As we develop this trust, anxiety loses its hold on us, and we begin to live with greater freedom. True wisdom lies in recognizing that no matter how much we plan or worry, only God can grant us the peace we seek. The desire to control everything around us may seem like a natural response to life's challenges, but in reality, this control is illusory. Jesus teaches us that trying to manipulate the future or the events that surround us is a futile and often exhausting effort. When we try to force things to go the way we planned, we forget that there is a greater wisdom guiding history. God, in his infinite wisdom, knows what is best for us, and often what we consider a problem is actually an opportunity to grow in faith. Imagine someone who spends all their time worried about controlling every detail of their routine, their work, their relationships. This person ends up a prisoner of their own expectations. This causes emotional and physical exhaustion that could be avoided. Jesus' wisdom leads us to let go of this control. He challenges us to trust more and try less. When we accept that not everything is in our hands, we experience a freedom that can only come from trusting in God. Exercising control is often an attempt to avoid fear, but it is precisely in this fear that we find the call to faith. Life is full of uncertainty, and trying to control every aspect of it only creates more stress. Instead, we must learn to surrender our plans to God, knowing that He has the complete vision of our journey. A practical example of this is to reevaluate our priorities. Are we putting all our energy into controlling situations when we could be investing in strengthening our faith? Wisdom lies in recognizing the limits of our actions and trusting that, beyond these limits, God takes care of every detail. Jesus offers us a powerful image of the relationship we should have with God, that of a loving and protective Father. Just as a child trusts his or her parents completely, knowing that they will take care of all his or her needs, we are also invited to develop this trust. Modern life often distances us from this healthy dependence, but Jesus reminds us that being a child of God is a privilege that brings us peace and security. When we recognize God as our Father, faith grows and anxiety diminishes. After all, a father would never leave his or her child helpless. The concept of trusting God as a father is not something abstract. It is practical and real. Imagine a child who, without thinking twice, runs into his or her father's arms when he or she is afraid. He or she does not question whether or not he or she will protect him or her. This level of trust is what we should strive for. To practice this in your daily life, set aside moments of reflection to remember the times when God has taken care of you. Meditating on these memories can strengthen our confidence that He will continue to guide us, even in the most challenging moments. A relationship with God as our Father is an inexhaustible source of hope. When we trust Him in this way, we realize that we do not have to carry the weight of life alone. God, in His wisdom, knows what we need, and He is always there, guiding and protecting us. This trust transforms our perspective, leading us to live. Living as children of God grants us a freedom that we often overlook. This freedom does not refer only to living without superficial worries, but to a complete liberation from the anxiety and fear that often consume us. When we understand that our needs will be met by God, who knows us deeply, worries begin to lose their power. The wisdom of Jesus teaches us that by giving our worries to Him, we free ourselves from this heavy burden that afflicts us so much. Think about how many times anxiety has taken over your thoughts, preventing you from enjoying the present. This emotional slavery is exactly what Jesus came to help us overcome. When we trust in God, we are not dominated by insecurity. A simple exercise to cultivate this trust is to start the day in prayer, giving your worries to Him. This daily practice can change your mindset, helping to transform anxiety into faith and hope. Small habits like this lead us to a lighter and freer life. True freedom lies in understanding that we do not need to be slaves to worries. We are called to live in peace, knowing that God is in control of everything. This does not mean that we will never have problems, but rather that we will face challenges with confidence, without being dragged down by the anxieties of life. When we allow God to govern our thoughts and actions, we discover a genuine freedom that allows us to live with wisdom and renewed hope. Surrendering our lives to God is a transformative step, an act of faith that frees us from the worries that wear us down every day. Jesus invites us to make this surrender, to trust that God knows what is best for us, even when the path seems uncertain. This gesture of total trust leads us to a fuller and more balanced life, where God's wisdom guides every decision. It is like giving up control to allow Him to lead us with His care and love, which overcome any anxiety we may carry. Instead of fighting against the flow of life, Jesus calls us to rest in the certainty that God is in control. It is in this surrender that we find true peace. For someone who is living a routine full of worries, the practice of meditating on God's promises and praying for guidance can be a practical way to begin to surrender. Wisdom is not in having all the answers, but in trusting that God will provide what we need at the right time. He will never leave us helpless. Jesus' invitation is for everyone. No matter what problems or challenges lie ahead, there is always room to surrender everything into God's hands. When you do, you will find a peace that goes beyond human comprehension. God, in His infinite goodness, wants you to live without the chains of anxiety and fear. This surrender is the beginning of a journey of faith and hope that completely transforms the way we see the world and our struggles. After all, if we trust in God, what else do we need to fear? Now that you understand the importance of not worrying, the big question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you willing to hand over your anxieties to God and trust completely in His care? Think about how many times you have exhausted yourself trying to solve everything on your own, when true wisdom lies in trusting the one who is in control of everything. Change begins when you decide to take this step of faith, and the results can be more transformative than you can imagine. So tell me, are you going to continue to be trapped by anxiety, or are you going to choose the freedom that God offers? The decision is in your hands. And remember, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss any more content like this, and continue learning how to live with more faith, hope, and wisdom. Let's go on this journey together.